Welcome to the Attention Deficit Disorder Expert Podcast Series by Attitude Magazine.
Hello, everyone. I'm Carol Fleck, and on behalf of the Attitude team, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD Experts presentation titled New Year, New Playbook, Game Plans That Work for Your ADHD Brain. Leading today's presentation is Tracy Otsuka. Tracy is a certified ADHD coach, attorney, podcast host, and author of the new book, ADHD for Smartass Women. Over the years, she has empowered thousands of clients to see their neurodivergence as a strength. In today's webinar, we'll discuss the challenges and solutions to getting things done. Adults with ADHD know what they need to do, but they struggle to get started. Imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and executive function struggles all get in the way. Our expert will share strategies that suit your ADHD brain, build confidence, and leverage your strengths. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome Tracy. Thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this discussion.
Thank you, Carol. And Carla, right? It was Carla?
She's Carly.
Carly.
Yeah.
Carly. Okay, now you see my ADHD brain in full blooming color. It is an honor to be here. Thank you so much. And thank you so much to the audience who's out there. Happy New Year, first of all. So, of course, today we're going to talk about the new year and a new playbook. We're going to break the overwhelm cycle of getting things done. So, I just wrote a book with HarperCollins William Morrow, as Carol mentioned, called ADHD for Smartass Women. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. I struggle to write. Yeah, go figure, but I wrote a book. I fancy myself a bit like Dorothy Parker, who was credited with saying, "I hate writing, but love having written." Poor Dorothy Parker. She was brilliant, but she, like me, really struggled to get her writing done. Dorothy co-wrote Hollywood screenplays. Her most famous, you may be familiar with it, was A Star is Born. She also helped to form the Screenwriters Guild, but then found herself blacklisted in the 1950s because of her communist affiliations, code for she was vocal about human rights and civil rights, and she criticized those in authority. In her early years, she wrote for the likes of Vogue and Vanity Fair and The New Yorker. She was witty and outspoken. So she was fired from Vanity Fair for offending the powers that be. If simplistic strategies like Nike's Just Do It didn't work for a mind as sharp and a pen as mighty as Dorothy's, then it certainly wouldn't work for me, and it likely doesn't work for you either. Look, if Just Do It worked, we'd already have done it. And while tips and tricks are great, they're not guaranteed to work for us either. Often, if the tip or trick isn't quite the right fit, we quickly forget about it. This leaves us knowing what we need to do, but not knowing how to actually get it done. So today, let's explore some strategies that align better with the unique wiring of our ADHD brain. I'll help you swap out the one-size-fits-all approach for strategies that resonate with who you already are. You already have successful systems in place. You just don't know it yet. And that's no surprise because your systems and strategies were likely different than a neurotypical's, and this is someone whose brain functions similar to other ordinary people. You probably were led to believe early on that you weren't doing it right, and therefore you didn't have legitimate systems and strategies. Transforming how you manage overwhelm and get things done in the new year, it's about finding your rhythm and playing to your strengths rather than conforming to neurotypical game plans that, frankly, they just don't work for us. Look, I'm not a great writer, but I am a fabulous editor. But in order to get me to the point where I'm actually editing, you pretty much have to cement me to the chair. This was so frustrating. So I started to look into, well, why might that be? Well, because what's required for me to write is strong executive function skills. Skills like planning and scheduling and organizing, time management, decision-making, emotional regulation, among other things. All of these cognitive skills involve our executive functions. Executive function is like the CEO of our brain. It makes sure that we get things done, and it is exactly what ADHD brains are challenged by. I'll tell you more about that in a bit. For me, when it came to writing, I had all these thoughts in my head, which I then had to organize into some form of an outline. And then I had to choose the most important thoughts. Was it this thought? Was it not important? Was it slightly important? Was it important? Was it very important? Was it the most important? This is an impossible decision when you have a brain like mine that thinks everything is important. And then, what if I forgot something? But let me tell you a secret. Focused attention actually causes you to confirm what you already know. So that's all you look for. Unfocused attention, on the other hand, or inattention, what those of us with ADHD have, right, allows you to take everything else that's going on in around you. That sideways glance, patterns in data or behavior, connections between unrelated topics or ideas. So who do you think is going to be more creative? Not the neurotypicals with their focused attention. It's going to be us with our unfocused attention. So I started to think about strategies to getting things done, and the fact that although everyone's ADHD symptoms and traits look a little different, which is what makes it hard to diagnose, right? There were a few things that we all have in common that might be helpful. If we're not interested, forget about it. We all have interest-based nervous systems. And this is exactly why the just do it approach fails for our ADHD brains. What's important to others doesn't automatically become important to us. What am I talking about? Neurotypical people have an importance-based nervous system. If it's important to their parents, teachers, coaches, partners, bosses that they get something done, they'll just do it. They have no problem doing what others around them have deemed important. School, right? Even if they're not interested. We, however, with ADHD, have interest-based nervous systems. If we're not interested, it is really difficult for us to get that thing done. It's not that we need to try harder, we have a character flaw or a moral failing. It's neurobiology. So why might this be? Dopamine is the culprit. Our brains don't make enough dopamine, or we don't process it in the same way neurotypicals do. We're not sure. We're not 100% sure. So dopamine is that feel-good neurotransmitter that's responsible for feeling pleasure, reward, motivation. It's also responsible for learning and focus. It affects all those executive functions that we were talking about earlier. Our ability or struggles with planning, scheduling, time management, motivation, emotional regulation, etc. These are all skills that affect how we get things done, right? Now, if we're interested in doing that thing, we can do it quite well and likely better than you neurotypicals. Thank you very much. But when we're not interested, we struggle. And then people think she's all over the place. She can't focus, which isn't true. What is true is we can't focus on the things you want us to focus on, but we can focus on the things that we're interested in, so much so that we hyperfocus and lose track of time. We are very mission-driven, justice sensitive. However, we need to be engaged by what's of interest to us. So what is the other thing that those with ADHD brains all seem to have in common? We thrive with positive emotion. The ADHD brain thrives with positive emotion and positively wilts with negative emotion. And this would make perfect sense because positive emotion, feeling good, being proud of ourselves also fires that elusive dopamine, and it makes it easier for us to accomplish those tasks we're interested in, and also makes it possible for us to complete those tasks we are uninterested in. And so, in the spirit of positive emotion, I always share this statistic. Yep. Do you know that 43% of all people with ADHD are in excellent mental health? Not okay mental health, not good mental health, excellent mental health. There was a big study out of Canada in 2022, February, March, that showed that this is true. So instead of focusing on the pathology or weaknesses, why don't we ask, what are those 43% of people doing to feel so good? And why don't we do more of that? I don't believe for a minute that you are defective or you are disordered. I think we have a different brain that uses a different operating system. Frankly, I think we're Macs in a Windows-driven world. And I don't know about you, but I'd want to be a Mac. As I said above, we already have systems. We may just not know that we have systems. And after 5 years of interviewing and talking to thousands of women with ADHD, I have never met an ADHD woman who wasn't truly brilliant at something. And what I know for sure is that we can all feel and do a lot better knowing that we're not defective or disordered, just different. So that begs the question, what else generates positive emotion and how do we use it to accomplish more in the new year? When you have a task that you need to complete, ask yourself, how do I make it more fun, make it more challenging, make it more social? So in the case of this book, this can look like, I don't know, working in a coffee shop instead of sitting here, in my house at my desk, working with friends who are spending time working on their own tasks, setting a timer and challenging myself to finish a task in 45 minutes and then trying to beat that time. In the case of getting the house picked up, I could wash the dishes and listen to music or a podcast. If I picked up everything off the counters and put it away last time in 15 minutes, I could challenge myself to do it in 10 minutes this time. I could call a friend when I'm trying to get the house picked up. For you, neurotypical parents or partners, I have a bonus for you. You want us to get something done for you? Make us think it's our idea and then bowl us over with all of the positive emotion once we do it. Better yet, jump in and help us because that makes it more social, right? What we need is a lot less nagging and a lot more nurturing. By the time an ADHD child is 10, they hear 20,000 more negative messages than a neurotypical child does. Can you imagine what that does to their sense of self-worth? Try positive emotion. You'll be surprised at how much better it works. So let's go back to poor Dorothy Parker, who was probably the most famous of procrastinators. First off, she said clever things like this, and I don't know about you, but I can totally relate. Dorothy considered herself a short distance writer rather than a long distance writer, and boy, can I relate to that. When Attitude asked me to write an article, no problem. If they would want a book, big problem. Dorothy could get short articles and short stories written, but she really struggled with her novel. In fact, she ignored its deadline for 37 years. Yeah, none of you have done anything close to that. Viking Press said it was the longest unfulfilled contract in the company's history. She'd send telegrams to her editors when she missed deadlines. Look at this. This is instead of telephoning because I can't look you in the voice. What a brilliant, witty sentence. And you should know that Dorothy Parker actually thought she had a system. She developed it at the New Yorker. So this was Dorothy's system. Monday through Thursday, she didn't write. Friday, she'd ignore the deadline. Sunday, when several of her editors would call demanding her column, sounds like a nightmare, Carol, doesn't it? When these editors would call demanding her column, she'd, start writing. I know that Dorothy's system would never work for me because frankly, it didn't work for her either. All that adrenaline would just trash my nervous system and yours too. So that got me really curious. Why do we procrastinate in the first place? Well, we've been led to believe that if we procrastinate, we're lazy. We're not trying hard enough. We don't care. No, it's really just about our little friend dopamine and how our brains work differently. Procrastination is dopamine deficit and emotion. It's how you feel about doing that thing that you don't want to do. Remember, emotional regulation, it's simply one of our executive functions that we struggle with. So what do we need to do? We need to increase our own dopamine. How do we do that? Well, we already know that we can make whatever we need to get done so much easier by making it more fun, challenging, social. So that's a strategy. But what if we could learn how to procrastinate better? Because frankly, I think procrastination gets a bad rap. So are you game? Okay. You know those irritating people who get an assignment that's due a month from now and they're literally working on it the same day they get it? You went to school with many of them. Maybe you work with some of them. Worse yet, maybe they're your sibling or your parent. Yeah, what the hell is wrong with those kinds of people, huh? We've been told since childhood, right, that the early bird always gets the worm. But do they? What if I told you that procrastinators actually do better work than those early birds, but it's a certain kind of procrastinator? A study compared students who did work right when it was assigned. Let's call them early birds. And then it compared their work to students who slid in at the very last minute. Let's call them severe procrastinators. You know, the kind who start studying the night before, take no dose, and then don't sleep all night, and then show up to take the test the next morning. That was my first year of undergrad when I thought I was going to be a dentist. Yeah, no aptitude, no interest. Well, both of their work, the early birds and the severe procrastinators, was basically, it was not very good. You know whose work was the best? Yep, moderate to substantial procrastinators. These were the students who opened the assignment when they got it, took some notes, maybe jotted down a quick outline. They understood the assignment, but then they didn't really look at the assignment until much closer to when it was due. So why would that be? Because according to one of my favorites, organizational psychologist Adam Grant, procrastinators have been working on it the entire time. What? Yeah, your brain is constantly processing and working even when you're not actively on task. You know how when you're interested in buying a car that you've never heard about? So for me, it was the Kia Telluride. I saw a commercial on the Super Bowl in 2019. I didn't even realize I had seen it. But when we needed a car at the end of 2019, somehow I remembered that car. So of course, now that I remembered the Telluride commercial and I needed a car, I started seeing Tellurides everywhere and articles about Tellurides everywhere. A guy pulls up with a Telluride and you're asking him all kinds of questions about his Telluride. Well, that's your reticular activating system at work. Even though you're not doing anything, your brain is working on whether or not you should or shouldn't buy a Telluride. And so pretty soon, before you know it, you own a Telluride. I highly recommend this car, by the way. And this school or work project is no different. And that's exactly how I created this presentation. Carol Fleck at Attitude, you have already met her, actually asked me to do this presentation right before Halloween. And then smart woman that she is, she also asked me to create a description of what I was going to talk about. So I did a little bit of research and I pulled together this description that you probably read when you signed up. And then I put it away. But because I knew what I was going to talk about, lo and behold, I started to notice more research around procrastination. And I started to think more about what I already knew about procrastination and past presentations I had created on procrastination. A month later, I had enough churning around in my brain that I threw together an outline. And then I let it sit for another month. To be honest, I let it sit until right before my deadline this week. Right, Carly? And let me tell you, creating a presentation this way is easy peasy compared to waiting until the very last minute.
Waiting on a tax return? Hopefully it ends up in your hands. Fraudulent tax returns due to identity theft increased by 30% in 2023. If you're in a bind this tax season, LifeLock can help. Our U.S.-based restoration specialists are experts dedicated to helping solve your identity theft issues. And all LifeLock plans are backed by the $1 Million Protection Package. So we'll reimburse you up to the limits of your plan if you lose money due to identity theft. Help protect your information this tax season with LifeLock. Save up to 25% your first year at LifeLock.com/aware.
I mean, think about it. Let's use our enormous creativity and our problem-solving abilities. After all, even scientists say that ideation is one of our main strengths. We have these creative brains. Let's give ourselves every advantage. Science shows us that when we learn something new, the best way to consolidate our learning and then come up with new ideas is to sleep on it. People, this is free work time and we don't have to do anything. So our brains are working on the problem even when we're sleeping. Because when we do this, we're always going to come up with more out-of-the-box ideas. And that is exactly what makes our work better. We are true problem solvers. We see opportunities when others just see a problem. We make connections when others don't. So, for your next project, you're going to open up the email, the assignment, the notes, immediately. Remember, it's the emotion that's holding you back. Either you're feeling like, oh, I've got plenty of time. I don't need to do this now. But then later, the deadline is looming and you don't even want to go there because you're so overwhelmed by what you might find. So you keep putting it off and putting it off and putting it off until you're right at the deadline and you have no choice. And we already know when we create work as extreme procrastinators, it's not going to be as good as if we create work as substantial procrastinators. Okay. Step 2, you're going to make sure you understand the problem you want to solve. And then you're just going to, number 3, go on your day in positive emotion without a worry and let your brain go to work. And I want you to consider this. If you're waiting until the very last minute, what are you doing for weeks up until that deadline anyway? You're worrying about the project, which shuts down your prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for your executive functions, right? It reduces your dopamine and it generates nothing but negative emotion. Just like Dorothy Parker, when we're feeling the emotion of doing that hard thing, we look for distractions. Anything to stop feeling that uncomfortable feeling, right? For Dorothy, it got so bad, she drank a bottle of shoe polish to run from the negative emotion. She was hospitalized, but then she got better. And guess what? Her writing was still waiting for her. She couldn't out-distract it. So if we're going to think about your assignment or project anyway, let's generate some positive emotion and its cousin dopamine along the way to make you feel good. It's so much easier to get things done that way. Plus, you'll have a better work product. So let's talk about some other strategies when you're feeling overwhelmed. You're spinning, you're trying to start, and you can't. Again, we know what we need to do. We just don't know how to start doing it. I call this managing the big O. Sorry, not that kind of O. We're talking overwhelm. The first thing you need to focus on is regulating your nervous system. And we are going to start by going back to our trusty friend, positive emotion. Remember, we can't move forward on much of anything if we're in our heads spinning and overthinking and ruminating and beating ourselves up. We need to get into our body to regulate our nervous system first. And we do that by finding positive emotion. It always comes back to dopamine and positive emotion. The first question to ask when you feel the big overwhelm is, what will make you feel better than how you currently feel? You don't have to go from feeling bad to feeling great. There are all kinds of steps in between, right? So a lot of this is trial and error. But I'll start with some options that seem to work for most people in allowing you to feel better than you currently feel. Exercise. Studies show it's equivalent to a dose of Adderall and Prozac together. Nature. Getting out in nature, even for 10 minutes every morning, is life-changing for many. Sun, I didn't know this up until, probably the last webinar I did here. Sun fires dopamine, and it sets your circadian rhythm, making it easier to fall asleep. Breath work. Breath work. All of these different breathing techniques. Inhale for 6 seconds, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. I can't remember any of them. Well, it turns out that any kind of breathing helps as long as it's deep, not shallow, and it slows your breathing down. So any technique works as long as it slows your breathing down. So I do 6, 7, 8 because that's what I can remember. I inhale for 6 seconds, hold for 7, breathe out for 8. Number 4, grounding. So grounding is a way to calm your mind by noticing what's around you, like what you touch or see. It helps you get out of your head and back into your body by focusing on the present when you're feeling overwhelmed. You're looking for 5 things you can see. You're finding 4 things you can touch. You're listening for 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, finding 1 thing that you taste. And number 5, my favorite, tapping. Tapping is a technique where you gently tap on specific body parts to relieve stress, calm your nerves, and focus your mind. And it comes from, oh my gosh, I can't remember the word hole. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. I will remember it. So I think a lot of people think tapping, oh my gosh, that must be like woo-woo. No, actually, there's over 200 studies around tapping. And the Veterans Administration here in the United States uses it for PTSD. Our largest HMO, Kaiser, offers tapping therapy. It is the gold standard for anxiety in Australia. And what I love about it is it's basically free. You learn how to do it, and you can do it anywhere without a therapist. You're your own therapist. And what you are doing in all these, they call them somatic strategies or therapies where you're going into your body, you're basically teaching yourself how to regulate your own nervous system. So now that you're back in your body, what are we going to do next? You're going to set your intention. So how do we go about doing that? Okay. So we paused, right? We're back in our body. We've regulated our nervous system. We also know we have brains of interest, not importance. So we're going to with them and with them, which is, you know what with them is, right? What's in it for me? With them is what's in it for them, right? You're going to ask yourself, is there a way to spin what they want me to do that I'm not that interested in doing in such a way that I can be more interested? Number 3, you're going to put yourself into the future. And I know that's hard because we're now and not now kind of people, right? Remember, we struggle with planning, scheduling, even seeing ourselves in the future. But that really is the key. And I'm going to give you some examples in a second. When you're connected to your intention and your future self, it's much easier to, number 4, lean into the discomfort, lean into the emotion of doing those things that are difficult for you to do. And then number 5, you're going to focus on how you want to feel at the end to set your intentions. So here's an example for with them. What's in it for me? And then obviously what's in it for them that becomes what's in it for me anyway, right? So let's say your partner is frustrated with the fact that you're always late and you feel like they're trying to control you. Well, every partnership is about one of 2 things, power or connection. And most of us are, if you really, are honest with yourself, we're after connection, right? But we get trapped in these power struggles. You might pause and think, look, I love my partner and I don't want them to think I don't care. I want to feel that connection. It serves me. And in the process, it serves them too. And it's not fair to them that they're always waiting for me. I can understand how this would make them feel like I don't care. So you're not only using with them, you're also wifting them, right? Here's an example for number 3, connecting to your future self using your intention. This one was my son. He doesn't like to write. He's the one who started all this. He has ADHD and dyslexia, and he is a senior at NYU. He doesn't like to write, but he wants to become a psychologist, which makes me so proud. It's tied to his values, strengths, passion, and purpose. And so he's now able to look into the future, and he's connecting to the intention he set for himself, which makes it a lot easier for him to write. I wonder if that's genetic. I just thought of that. Example number 4 for leaning into the discomfort and emotion. So because school was so much harder for him when he was in high school and in the early years of college, it was hard because he wasn't connected to the intention of who he wanted to become for himself. He couldn't see his future self, which made it much harder to lean into the emotion. Number 5. Focus on how you feel to set your intention. So again, in the case of my son, Marcus, he wants to feel challenged, successful, proud, and confident, right? Here's another example. My house is a bloody stinking mess. I'm going to go through the whole step 2. My house is a bloody stinking mess. I don't want to clean it. I hate doing it. So I'm not doing it. Well, when I think about Whiffum and Whiffdom, when my house is clean, what's in it for me? I wake up in the morning and I feel so much more positive emotion. Isn't that a great way to start your day out versus right away feeling overwhelmed and beating yourself up about all the things you can't do? So, and guess what? My partner and my kids feel the same way. So then I'm able to connect to my future self. I can see myself starting out my day, not having to deal with the physical clutter, so I can focus on what's really important to me. And then I use that positive emotion of seeing myself in the future to lean into the discomfort and emotion of getting into action to make this a reality. And can I just say, when it comes to keeping a house, if you have a family, and you're a woman, this does not mean that this is solely your job or responsibility. You need help. And I think this is why ADHD women struggle so much more with ADHD than ADHD men. You need help. A lot of the reasons why women struggle much more with ADHD is because of these gender role stereotypes and sexism. I want you to then think about how good it will feel, because you're going to focus on how you want to feel, to wake up and feel peaceful, competent, reliable, and proud of yourself. So that leads us to our next step, step 3, which is to figure out who you want to be. You are going to set your identity. We're going to start small, but we're going to start. Let's go back to our my house is a mess scenario. We've already established that you want to be someone who wakes up in the morning and feels peaceful and competent, reliable, and proud of yourself. So then, Whiffum, what's in it for me? You want to feel this way because you know that when you're in positive emotion, everything is easier because you have more time to focus on those things that bring meaning to your own life. So now you're going to create a phrase that anchors your intention. Something like, I am the kind of person who puts things back in their place. Now, that's not a big thing. I'm not asking you to go clean the kitchen or put everything away all at once. We've chosen one small, doable task that we can do for 1 week, and that's all. When you have something in your hand, you're not going to just throw it down wherever you are. You're going to walk to wherever you need to walk to put it away because you've created an identity around being the kind of person who puts things in their place. And you're doing this for you, not anyone else. This has to be something that you want and that you have intention behind. So, as I said, start with a small task. For example, let's say you are totally dehydrated and you know it. Perfect time for a sip of water. By the way, most of us are, and we don't even realize it. Our poor little brains are walking around completely dehydrated, and it really affects our cognitive abilities. For the longest time, I thought my burning eyes were just a sign of aging. Nope, I was dehydrated. So you're going to create a simple identity statement around this glass of water, right? I am the kind of person who drinks one glass of water first thing in the morning when I get up. Or I'm the kind of person who spends 10 minutes outside first thing in the morning. Or I am the kind of person who does not check my phone the minute I get up. And this is the deal that you're going to strike with yourself. If you do nothing else but keep this one intention and build your identity as the kind of person who drinks a glass of water every morning, then your week will be successful. So let me tell you why this seemingly silly thing is so important. Because what you are doing is you are proving to yourself that you can be reliable to you, not anyone else, you. Look, when we grow up constantly being told we're wrong, we're doing it wrong, we should do it this way, and we can't do it that way, we fall into learned helplessness and we stop making decisions for ourselves. We stop trusting ourselves. We stop trusting our own intuition. We make everyone else the expert on who we are and what we should do. And between you and me, I don't know a quicker prescription for unhappiness than that. This is the truth, though. You are the expert on you. Everyone else can be the expert on themselves, but they are not the expert on you. You are the expert on you. So by creating this identity that is grounded in your intentions, you are teaching yourself once again how to start or how to start trusting your own intuition or start trusting it again, right? Some of us did trust our intuition when we were young and then started listening to everybody else. And pretty soon we don't trust it anymore. Some of us have never trusted our intuition. So if you are trying to do things that you don't really want to do to please other people, it's no wonder that you're struggling to get them done because there's no intention on your part. You're doing these things to make everyone else happy, right? And even in the things you're not interested in, there needs to be a reason why it's important to you that you do it, because otherwise it's going to be really hard to get it done. So what are we going to do next? Okay, now it's time to develop a cohesive, actionable plan. We're going to figure out how to get things done. So you're going to first ask yourself, have you ever had success doing something similar to what you need to do now? What did you do? How did you do it? Where did you do it? There is no point in reinventing the wheel. Then, number two, you're going to ask yourself, what was your system that you used to get it done? When I had to seriously write this book, I remembered in college that I couldn't study at home. I had to go to the library. So I decided to test going back to the library. I tested going to the coffee shop. I tested working at a friend's house to see if any of these strategies still might work. And it turns out the first two did. Then you're going to ask yourself, what are your VIA character strengths? So the VIA character strengths survey, it's a free quiz that helps you find your top personal strengths, strengths like kindness or creativity. Unlike values, which often can feel aspirational, character strengths are how you currently move in the world right now. They're as natural to you as breathing. Knowing your top character strengths and using them to get done what you need to get done is very helpful. Let me give you an example. Among my top character strengths is creativity. Many of you have the same top character strength of creativity. So I'll ask, how can I use my creativity to get that difficult thing done? If I'm struggling to read something, I'll get on the treadmill and walk as I'm reading. Or I know that part of the reason I struggle with writing is it's hard for me to order my thoughts, right? Since I'm a big picture thinker, I'll put a giant Post-it note on the wall. I'll get out a Sharpie and I'll jot down every thought I have so I can get it all out of my head. And then I'll put each one of those thoughts on a Post-it note, and then I can organize them in the order that suits my brain. If I try a strategy and it doesn't work, I'll use my character strengths to figure out why. Sometimes I need to get something done with someone else, and it's like climbing a mountain. I don't want to go there. I don't want to meet them. I am just pushing back. When I pause and I get curious around why without fail this happens, what I will realize it's almost always that the person that I'm doing this project with has no sense of humor. My second character strength, via character strength, is humor. So the VIA Character Strength Survey, again, it's free. You can just Google VIA Character Strength Survey and you will find it. I find it so helpful, and so do my students. And then don't forget to add these tools that we learned at the beginning of this training. Make it more fun, make it more challenging, make it more social. That's where you want to build your creativity around. Finally, step 5, we need to celebrate. On my podcast, I often meet the most incredibly accomplished women, but when the mic's off, they'll tell me they don't feel very successful. And you can understand why. We're what I call next people, right? And this, again, is because of our inconsistent dopamine. We accomplish something incredible, and then we're like, next, heading off to find more dopamine. We don't celebrate. We don't know how to celebrate. And ultimately, if you don't know how to celebrate, and like me, you have a really poor working memory, you start to think that you've accomplished nothing of merit. It never fails. When I talk to someone with ADHD, I am always blown away by the interesting things they've done. Often they're not connected so that they can seem all over the place. But when we're doing the right work in that sweet spot between our values, strengths, talents, skills, passion, and purpose, remember, we're mission-driven people, then it almost always it doesn't almost always make sense. It always makes sense. So in our community, we require our members to pause and celebrate even their smallest successes. We call ourselves gold star people. Although we discount our successes, we really love when they're acknowledged because positive emotion, right? Okay, so I promised you a few tips and tricks, and I realize we're getting close to the end here. So let's just do these really quick. Okay. We'll do a lightning round, and I'm just going to blow through them as quickly as I can. The time cube is my top productivity tool. It's a cube with presets, 5, 10, 20, 25-minute timers. Plus it has a countdown display. When I'm in my head, I'm trapped in the emotion of not wanting to start. I'm procrastinating. I get out of my head and into action, flip the time cube to 25 minutes and start. There's no searching for apps or pressing buttons. It sits on my desk, so I see it. There's no friction, so I use it. And the deal I strike with my brain is all you have to do is 25 minutes. Do you know? We struggle with transitions, right? We struggle with starting. We struggle with stopping. So once I start, I don't stop. Next one, the Bear app. This is the app that I recommend if you never want to lose information again. It's an iOS app, but I understand that the comparable Android app is called Supernotes, and I've been told it's equally as good. Bear helps me to organize my notes, my paint colors, links I can never remember, word holes. You know those words that there's a hole in your brain and you can't ever remember them? Yeah, like evolutionary, I can't remember it. Everything and anything I don't want to lose goes into Bear. It doesn't use files, which I love, so I just search for it. I never have to put it anywhere. Chat, the Chrome app and tab resize. As you can see, you can have 4 screens up at one time, which means that you don't get as distracted constantly going out of that screen to find what it is that you're working on. And I also recommend a 27-inch second monitor. It is a game changer. Once you get that 27-inch monitor and you get tab resize, you're going to wonder how you ever got anything done. Last one, I think it's the last one, Chat GPT. Again, I struggle to write, but love to edit. ChatGPT helps me quickly process and organize all my thoughts. I can upload a PDF of my entire book. I can write bullet points down of my thoughts, and then I ask ChatGPT to organize and then outline them. I can't rave enough about it. You want to upgrade to 4.0 because it writes so much better. It'll summarize a whole PDF. It'll summarize my whole book in 2 minutes. And you also want to set up custom instructions, which tells it who you are, first of all, and how you want to write. I am so sorry. I am totally over here, but we're almost done. So that takes us back to Dorothy Parker. One of my favorite reasons she gave for missing a deadline was somebody was using the pencil. From research I've done on Dorothy Parker, I know we would be friends. I love her brilliance, her wittiness, her desire to challenge the status quo, but also how she beat herself up when she couldn't finish. I'm pretty confident that today Dorothy would be diagnosed with ADHD. I think that we're so lucky to have a much better understanding of the brain and how to inspire it to get things done. We can reject just do it for tools that actually work much better for us. We have so many different pencils. Let's figure out what pencils actually work for you, because as you know, you are the best expert on you. And if you're looking to discover more pencils, I invite you to check out my brand new book, ADHD for Smartass Women. Oh, I'm so sorry. I ran late.
Thank you, Tracy.
Story of my life.
Before we start the Q&A, I'd like to share the final results from today's poll question. Reflecting on the past year, what was your primary productivity challenge? 32% said overcoming procrastination. 15% said sticking to routines or schedules. 16% said distractions or maintaining focus. 9% said regulating emotions. 8% said prioritizing tasks effectively. And 8% also said time management. 7% said organization. So now to your questions. It's very difficult, someone writes, to push myself to do something that takes so much time. Even when I think of the positive outcome, I feel panicked. How do I continue encouraging myself on the days I want to give up?
It's always about positive emotion. And so, for example, I wanted to create a website. This was a couple of years ago. And I literally had create my website on my to-do list. And I had this long, giant to-do list. And I think with our ADHD brains, we're just constantly in this doing mode. And so we have a million things on our to-do list. And then at the end of the day, we've accomplished 8 of them. And we're thinking, oh my God, I'm lazy. Like, look at all the stuff other people can accomplish. I think we're unrealistic. And so what I would do is I would take that one big thing, I would break it down into the littlest components that you possibly can. And I would include a few of those every week on your to-do list. That is what you want to do for yourself. And then as you finish them, you're going to check them off, right? And every single thing that you check off of that to-do list is going to fire your dopamine, which is going to allow you to do the next thing. But my premise is that we tend to have a lot of things on our to-do list that have nothing to do with us, right? So they have to do with getting things done for other people. And then we wonder why it's such a struggle. The first thing you want to add to your to-do list, and I always recommend doing them on a Saturday or a Friday so that you can hit the ground running on Monday. You want to fill your to-do list first with those things that you need to do and want to do for yourself that have intention.
Okay. We had quite a few questions around work. The first one is, can you provide guidance as to how I can flip my narrative and boost my confidence for job interviews?
Okay, so it's all about thoughts, right? So I think the first thing that I would do is, I would focus on, so we need to regulate our nervous system, right? I'm just thinking like you're sitting there, you're waiting for a job interview. It's been so long since I've done this that it's kind of like, what would I do? The first thing you want to do is regulate your nervous system. And so what I would recommend is probably breath work when you're sitting there to calm the nervous system down. And one of the things that I have, and I can't remember if it's called, I can't read it. It's a whistle. It's a breathing tool. It looks like a whistle, but it's a breathing tool from Japanese monks, but I can't remember which ones. And it allows you to breathe really deep, a lot deeper than you would ordinarily be able to breathe. And so this is probably the first tool that I would go to when I'm sitting in this waiting room, waiting for the job interview to start, because it really is about regulating your nervous system. I hope I answered that question.
Someone writes, during work, I get overwhelmed and I shut down when faced with a big project. How can I stay calm under pressure?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would put a list together of the things that help. Again, this is calming your nervous system, right? It's the nervous system regulation problem. I would put a list together of what are the things that you can do at work that make you feel better. So could you go out and take a 5-minute walk? Could you run down and go get a cup of coffee? Could you, go over to a work colleague that makes you feel good and just spend 5 minutes chatting with them? Something to take you out of the dysregulation that you're in, and calm your nervous system. So then when you go back into attacking the work, look, when our nervous system isn't calm, when we're spinning, when we're ruminating, our prefrontal cortex, we're taking it off, offline, that whole area of our brain, which is where our executive functions, are coming from, right? That's where they're working. So we've got to regulate our nervous system or we can't get anything done. So that always has to be the priority. And I always recommend that you put together a list of the things that work for you. If you're working at home, go pet your dog. Call a friend. I do a lot of procrastinating, just anything to calm everything down and then come back when you feel more regulated. And I know I'm 100% sure it'll be easier to tackle the problem.
Someone writes, what is a good way to explain to people at work that our brains work differently and why procrastination is a problem?
Well, I think what we need, I'm very vocal about my ADHD. And frankly, I'm very proud of it. Like, I'm not ashamed of it at all because there are so many things that it allows me to accomplish that other people can't, right? So that's kind of where I start. However, in a work environment, I probably would not go in initially and start talking about my ADHD because once the cat's out of the bag, you can't get the cat back in. And what happens to a lot of people, neurotypicals, is they hear ADHD and then every problem that ever happens, it's attributed to the ADHD instead of if a neurotypical had the problem, they just think, oh, it's just, it happens, no big deal. So I think what I would do is I would ask for accommodations, and I hope I'm answering this question. I would ask for accommodations that relate to the symptoms rather than ADHD until I know that there are people around me that I'm working with and working for that I really trust. At that point, I would disclose it. But before that, I would ask for accommodations that are around the symptoms. Like, I can't sit in this big bullpen and get anything done because then I'm just going to procrastinate even more. When you give me an assignment, it is really helpful if you give me a firm deadline. If you're loosey-goosey, the way my brain works is I'm just going to keep pushing it out because you didn't really seem to care about it. So I need to know that you really care about that deadline and it needs to be specific.
Okay. How do we know the difference between procrastinating well and not being accountable for ourselves?
I think ultimately it's about positive emotion, right? And it's about how you feel. When we are trying to do things that are meaningful to us, we will know. Let me give you an example. So live video was really a problem for me. And I knew it. So I took all these programs, all these courses. I had all the tech. I had the beautiful backdrops. I had everything. But a year later, I still had never gone live because there was this fear that was holding me back, right? Like, I don't know, speaking in public is no problem for me, but on this kind of setting, like, you don't know, in this kind of setting, you don't know who's out there, right? So that was really a problem. And what I realized is that is what I really wanted to do for me. It wasn't for anyone else. It wasn't because people kept telling me this is what you need to do. It was what I wanted to do for myself. And lo and behold, when I finally did it, I signed up for a program and I had to literally do live video every single day for 12 days. By day 2, I was like, this is actually fun. I really like this. And guess what? The dopamine spiked. So when we are doing things that are in our wheelhouse of all of that purpose and values and, intention and identity, you're going to feel positive emotion. The things you don't care about, you're not going to feel positive emotion. So again, I always say, look for the positive emotion and start trusting yourself. And those things that you most want to do are probably the things that you're most scared of. But I am telling you, what you're going to learn is how much doing that scary thing is going to spike your own dopamine. And then what are you going to do? You're going to start going back to that when you're feeling down. So what would happen after all that live video is when I was sitting around going, I don't know what to start. I'm feeling negative. I just don't feel positive emotion. I would go live. I would just, and that would spike my dopamine. And that little bit of dopamine would ratchet everything, all the positive emotion up, right? to allow me to do the next thing. And then I would use that to do the next thing. So it's like a ladder, right? I can never do that hard thing. I can never write at 9 a.m, no matter how hard I try. I know it's 2:00, right? It's just, you learn what works for you and you just stop beating yourself up about it.
Someone says, I procrastinate mostly because of perfectionism. How do I get past that and understand that not everything has to be perfect?
Well, there is no such thing as perfectionism. And I am a recovering perfectionist, so I completely relate to what you're saying. But again, perfectionism, it's about emotion, right? It's, either the discomfort of doing that scary thing that you need to do. And the truth of the matter is nothing is ever perfect. But we can make things better. And so by getting yourself out there and doing those things that you fear, that are scary, but you really want to do for you, that is truly how you overcome perfectionism, or at least, what's the thing that they always say that women have? There's a term for it, but it basically means a lack of confidence. We have been led to believe that confidence is something you're just born with. And that's as far from the truth as could be. Confidence, you develop confidence through action. The more scary things you do that you really want to do for you, lo and behold, the more confidence, you have. So it really is about getting into action. Perfectionism doesn't serve anyone, and least of all, not you.
Someone writes, I have a lot of trouble sticking with a new system, a new habit. How can I help make this year's plan better and stickier?
Okay. So I read Atomic Habits and I was like, there is literally one thing in here that I can use. It just didn't work for my brain. And I'm not even going to say ADHD brain. I'm just going to say my ADHD brain, because it might work for you, right? It was just such neurotypical advice. Things like eat the frog. No, I'm not doing the first biggest thing first thing in the morning, right? Or what's the one where you, on your calendar, you plan everything, like a week in advance. Like, no way. It's about emotion. I'm not sure I'm going to want to do that then. So I'm not doing that. You have to figure out what works for you. Forget about what other people are doing. Figure out the strategies that work for your brain. We're all different, but there are certain strategies for the ADHD brain, many of which I talked about today, that you're just going to be more successful at. And once you can figure out what actually works for you, double down on that. Forget about what everybody else is doing. And, everybody's right now about habits and hacks and tricks. And I'm just like, yeah, some of them work, but most of them don't. But I found what works for me.
Well, unfortunately, that has to be our last question because we're out of time. But thank you so much, Tracy, for joining us today and for sharing your expertise with our ADHD community.
It was my absolute pleasure. Again, I just want to mention I have never met anyone with ADHD who wasn't truly brilliant at something. So go figure out what that is.
And thank you to today's listeners. Make sure you don't miss future Attitude webinars, articles, or research updates by signing up to receive our free email newsletters at attitudemag.com/newsletters. Thank you, and everyone have a great day. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
For more Attitude podcasts and information on living well with attention deficit, visit attitudemag.com. That's ADDITUDEMAG.com.